Hi everyone and welcome back here at 1000 PS. You can see in front of me the Yamaha XSR900 GP. But the big question is, does it solely serve the nostalgic aspect or is there more to it? We're gonna test it for you also on a day-to-day basis on the normal day-to-day streets, not only on the racetrack. So you can get a better picture, a bigger picture of the bike. And yeah, you better stay tuned.
The XSR900 GP from Yamaha is a bike that just visually is genuinely great to look at. People turn their heads, it catches attention, that's definitely a plus, but when it comes to the handling, honestly, it was all right, but not something that really blew me away. It's not the kind of bike I'd personally go out and buy. I found the riding position to be quite extreme. I had a lot of weight on my wrists. You're stretched out quite far, but at the same time, you're leaning forward quite a lot. And that really stood out to me. Sure, the display is easy to read. You've got everything you need. That was all fine. The gear shifting was no problem either. But one thing that did bug me were the mirrors. They look super cool, sticking out at an angle like that. But I just couldn't see a thing in them. I really had to tilt my head quite a lot, actually. And that ends up being a distraction. So that definitely stood out to me. I also felt like I couldn't rev it out properly. I know I had to shift quite a lot. And sure, once you do, it does pick up properly. So yeah, it was fun to ride. But that stood out to me as well. Personally, I really enjoy being able to fully stretch out a gear, and that just didn't feel like the case here. And yeah, in terms of how safe I felt, it was decent. I managed just fine, didn't have any real oh no moments. But there are definitely bikes out there that I'd feel more comfortable on, personally. One more thing worth mentioning with the Yamaha, I was a bit disappointed with the brakes. I felt like they didn't bite as sharply as I'd expect, especially from a bike at this price point. The braking response was all right, but I really felt like I had to squeeze hard to get anything to happen. And in a moment of panic, obviously it's important to know you can rely on your brakes. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get that feeling here.
Alright, so let's talk about my impressions of the Yamaha XSR900 in its GP version. The first thing that really stands out is the riding position. And it is seriously sporty. And when I say seriously, I mean almost racetrack level, if not exactly that. The next thing you notice is the fantastic modern TFT display. And once I got riding, the Akrapovič exhaust we had fitted was just perfect. Exactly the right amount of noise coming out of it. I didn't find it over the top, and it wasn't too tame either. It was just right. Now, let's get into the suspension. From my point of view, the XSR900 GP suspension is really well set up. It's a great compromise between sporty riding and something that's still suitable for country roads. In short, comfort. And yes, for me, this bike really feels at home on twisty back roads. Why? Because of the CP3 engine. We've known this CP3 engine for about a decade now, and it still brings that same sense of joy. It's no different on the XSR900 GP. When you're coming out of a corner, in first or even second gear, the torque just kicks you in the back, and it's an absolute blast. And thanks to the 3-cylinder setup, and of course Yamaha's engine design, it's also got loads of punch in the mid and upper rev ranges. So yeah, this engine is really versatile, and in this very sporty XSR900 GP, I'd say it feels completely at home. The brakes work really well too. I had no issues at all. And of course, if you're someone who wants to take it to the track, you can always upgrade the braking setup. You'd probably want to tweak the suspension a bit more too in that case. But all in all, I think the XSR900 GP is a super fun, fantastic bike.
the Yamaha XSR900 GP. This bike doesn't just look like something out of the old Grand Prix era. When you actually sit on it, you genuinely feel like you're on a proper sport bike. What I really like, apart from the styling, which I think is really well done and definitely echoes those earlier times, is the overall impression the bike gives you. The mirrors are mounted on the sides of the handlebar, not coming out from the fairing. That alone gives it this pure race bike vibe, because all you see in front of you is the screen and the cockpit, just like you'd expect on a racing motorcycle. And the riding position, I have to say, is brilliantly done. It's definitely geared towards a sporty setup, but at the same time, it still allows you to stay relatively comfortable for a decent stretch of time on the road. The combination of this riding posture and a really relaxed knee angle also has a big advantage. It makes you feel nicely integrated into the bike and gives you really good feedback. And it's also easy to move around on the bike when you want to ride more aggressively. The knee angle is fairly open, not too tight, so you can actually stay on the bike quite comfortably. So the riding position is definitely a highlight for anyone with a sporty mindset. It's very well executed overall. Not too extreme, but still allows for a really dynamic riding style. Another highlight of this bike is the engine. We've got Yamaha's 3-cylinder engine, which we already know from other models in the Yamaha lineup. And honestly, it's perfectly suited for road use. With its nearly 900cc, this is a really strong engine, especially for riding on public roads. It's got loads of torque right from the bottom, basically just above idle. It already pulls hard. It really surges forward from low revs and keeps going with a bit more punch, even in the higher rev range. So what you get is a very wide usable power band. It's not exactly typical of a supersport engine, but that actually makes it even better for sporty road riding, because you've got this broad rev range to work with and you're not constantly having to downshift just to get decent drive. And that's definitely a big plus. The next positive point is the suspension setup itself. It comes out of the box with fully adjustable suspension, so everyone can tune it to their personal needs. But even as standard, you can already say the setup is clearly geared towards sporty riding while still offering a good level of comfort. The damping isn't overly stiff. It's been tuned to give good feedback without being harsh on the road, which makes it a great match for sporty road use. Something else that works really well on this bike is the overall stability. The handling isn't twitchy or nervous. The bike feels very stable. And thanks to the compact build of the 3-cylinder engine, it also remains agile at the front end. So you've got the best of both worlds, sharp feedback and precision, with plenty of stability but still enough agility to handle higher speeds confidently. One small downside worth mentioning is the braking performance. Not so much the brakes themselves, but more the way the ABS is tuned. Once the brakes heat up a bit, they actually bite pretty well. The only issue is that the ABS kicks in quite conservatively and it tends to ease off the brake pressure fairly early, just to make absolutely sure the front wheel never comes close to locking up. And in that regard, the system is really on the cautious side. There's definitely room to allow a bit more braking force and enable better deceleration. Sure, on wet roads, it's a different story. In those situations, you are glad the system is more conservative. But under good conditions, dry roads, solid asphalt, theoretically, it could deliver stronger braking performance if the ABS allowed a bit more leeway. The next positive point is that the bike comes with both a Quickshifter and a blipper, and they both work really well. Gear changes are nice and crisp, very direct, and you get solid feedback when shifting. You can really feel when the next gear clicks in, and there's never a moment where you feel like you're stuck between gears. It works smoothly across pretty much the entire rev range and throttle positions. So no matter the riding situation, you can easily shift up or down. That part works really well overall. I also really like the sound of the bike, especially for street use. In my opinion, the 3-cylinder engine is ideal for road riding anyway. It doesn't need to be revved to the moon like a 4-cylinder with the same displacement, and it doesn't come across as screechy either. And that matters more and more nowadays, since the way a bike sounds really affects how it's perceived out on the road. When you're riding a 4-cylinder high in the revs, and sometimes you have to just to get the power. It always comes across as quite aggressive, and in today's world that kind of impression isn't always so welcome. One small downside worth mentioning is the braking performance, not so much the brakes themselves, but more the way the ABS is tuned. Once the brakes heat up a bit, they actually bite pretty well. The only issue is that the ABS kicks in quite conservatively, and it tends to ease off the brake pressure fairly early, just to make absolutely sure the front wheel never comes close to locking up. And in that regard, the system is really on the cautious side. There's definitely room to allow a bit more braking force and enable better deceleration. Sure, on wet roads it's a different story. In those situations you are glad the system is more conservative, but under good conditions, dry roads, solid asphalt, theoretically it could deliver stronger braking performance if the ABS allowed a bit more leeway. The next positive point is that the bike comes with both a quickshifter and a blipper, and they both work really well. Gear changes are nice and crisp, very direct, and you get solid feedback when shifting. You can really feel when the next gear clicks in, and there's never a moment where you feel like you're stuck between gears. It works smoothly across pretty much the entire rev range and throttle positions. So no matter the riding situation, you can easily shift up or down. That part works really well overall. I also really like the sound of the bike, especially for street use. In my opinion, the 3-cylinder engine is ideal for road riding anyway. It doesn't need to be revved to the moon like a 4-cylinder with the same displacement, and it doesn't come across as screechy either. And that matters more and more nowadays, since the way a bike sounds really affects how it's perceived out on the road. When you're riding a 4-cylinder high in the revs, and sometimes you have to just to get the power, it always comes across as quite aggressive, and in today's world that kind of impression isn't always so welcome. That's why I really like the 3-cylinder here, and I think it's great they've put this kind of engine into a retro-inspired bike. It's a great match and really well thought out. One small downside though might be the price of the bike. We're looking at a price of over 15,000 euro for the Yamaha here, so it's not exactly a bargain, but to be fair, while it might not be cheap, you're also getting a bike that's far from ordinary. The XSR900 GP isn't just a retro-style bike, it really captures that old-school Grand Prix vibe from back in the day, but with modern technology. And I think they've pulled that off really well. The styling comes across brilliantly, and even if you're not the biggest fan of supersport bikes, you can still get along with this one really well. I think the bike has a really wide range of uses. It covers the sporty side brilliantly, but at the same time it doesn't completely sacrifice comfort. So for anyone who enjoys sporty riding and wants a bike with a very responsive, flexible engine combined with loads of feedback and still a good level of comfort, I'd say this is a great option for many sport-focused riders. One more thing to add about the Yamaha XSR900 GP, we were running it with Bridgestone tires. As we mentioned before, the Yamaha already has a very sporty setup with lots of feedback and still a good level of comfort. And the Bridgestone S23 we used really added to that. It's not just about grip, though it offers plenty, but also the neutral steering response, which is a huge plus. That benefits a lot of bikes, especially those that maybe aren't inherently the most stable. It gives them extra calmness and precision. And as it turns out, on the Yamaha it definitely helped too. It gave the bike a bit more neutrality and stability and worked really well overall. I've got to say, I really liked the combination.
That's all we've got today for you guys. Let us know what you think. Do you think it's beautiful to look at, but you don't really want to give it a try yourselves? You don't want to ride it? Or maybe you do. Share your own opinion down in the comment section. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.